everyone, and welcome to another segment of the virtual event organized by the Igbo Conference, Disruptions, Breaks, and Ruptures. We're very, very pleased to have with us today Osita Chidoka, who was a Minister of Aviation in Nigeria, a one-time Corps Marshal and Chief Executive Officer of the Federal Road Safety Commission, Nigeria. Iko Bosi, no.
Hello.
Today, we're very, very pleased to have you with us, and we have a lot to learn from you today. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today, we know that so many people don't know about it. So the first one is your recent address to Ndi Igbo. It struck a number of critical introspective chords. What inspired you to make that video?
Well, nke izizi bụ na anya na Nigeria, there is an ongoing debate in Igbo land. And that debate is that we have young people who are very angry, who feel that the political elites of Igbo land are not representing them very well, that the political elites are conniving or kowtowing before their political contemporaries in other parts of Nigeria, particularly in the north. And these Igbo young people are growing in number. Many of them are mobilized by the IPOB, who talk about Biafra. Some of them are from Masob. Some are from the restructuring group, who says Nigeria needs to be restructured. But in all of these debates, there seems to be a uniformity of thought that the Igbo political leadership has failed the Igbo nation. And so the argument is that the leadership led by President Buhari has come into power, has distributed his appointments to Northerners, has tried to make it almost a Northern government, but that Igbos are not capable of challenging that view. And for those who want Biafra, they feel that the Igbo political elites are not speaking out in support of Biafra. So looking at that debate, I don't feel that there is a wrong or right side, but I feel that there's an important issue. So that discussion of Aba and Onitsha provided me an important platform to intervene. So when we talk about a political leadership, we fail to understand that it's the people that elect that leadership. We fail to understand that that leadership is reflective of what I call the ground norm, or what I call the most popular opinion you have. So let's assume that you feel strongly about any of the views, restructuring. You feel very strongly about Biafra, and you want to run for House of Reps in Anambra or Enugu. You're not likely to win that election. Because at the end of the day, the people that will vote in that election are those who are either induced by money, or those whom the party godfathers want to elect, or those whom the powers that be want elected. So basically, people that are elected are disconnected from these young people. So my first question to them is that if what the young people spend their time doing is discussing Onyeje party, Onyeje leva na Tankwabi, Onyeje leva na Toba, then it shows you what will happen when it comes time to elect leadership. Therefore, we have to go back to the basic issues, the first questions. And the first question is, what is really important to us? What do we believe in as a people? Because if you look at the 5 Igbo states of Nigeria, there are some areas we have done very well. In education, Igbos have done very well in Nigeria, but you will notice not predominantly private sector-led education, and because our people value education. If you look at mortality, infant mortality, maternal mortality, we're doing far better than other zones in Nigeria. But that is not because the government have provided all that infrastructure, partly because there is a private sector-led, there's a strong diaspora, and there's higher education. So our people tend to take care of themselves better. So therefore, there needs to be that intersection between what the people want and who they elect as their leadership. Let me take an instance I've always given. I have never seen an advert from any of the 5 Igbo states saying, today is our civil service advertisement day to employ people into the civil service. We are going to make sure that all the 3 zones of the states are, the 3 senatorial zones are represented, but people are going to take an exam. So they go in, write an exam, we publish the results of those who passed, those who didn't pass, and maybe cut off mark for the 3 senatorial zones and take them on merit. That in itself will have been something we can showcase as Ndibo, as important to us. So when I saw that the young people had that conversation at Aba, I said, no, Aba has decayed, Onitsha has decayed, because at a particular point in time in our history, the price of property in Onitsha and Ikoyi were the same. The rental income in Onitsha, GRA and Ikoyi was the same. Ikoyi has diverged and has become almost $1 billion economy. If you go to Banana Island today, properties are between from $500 million to $1 billion to buy a 1,500 square meter land. Meanwhile, Onitsha has regressed and stayed within that 50 to 120, 150 million naira range. What is the reason? The provision of infrastructure, the provision of societies that are conducive for elite and middle class living. So I just felt that that video offered me an opportunity to turn the question the other way. You that is talking about what is important to Igbo society, what have you done? Do your children speak Igbo? Have you gone to that school that you went to that you said made you who you are and donated a chalk, a chair, or a table? Have you even gone back to your village and taken up somebody who the family cannot pay their school fees and put them into any of the federal government colleges littered around Igbo land that nobody is interested in today, or those DMJs and CKC? And I was happy with the response. I was very happy with the reaction. So many people came in box to me and said, look, this is really what I would love to do. This is a wake-up call for me. One said I was actually speaking to him because there's somebody that needs this kind of help I'm talking about and is going to do something about it. So basically that video was a motivation to say that a leadership reflects a followership. If you notice, what has happened to Buhari is that for the 15 years, almost 16 years he was looking for power, or 12 years in 4 elections, he kept winning from 6 million votes to 7 million to 11 million in 2011. Despite his failing the election, the number of votes he won shows you that he didn't need to distribute money to anybody to get it. So any leader that is in the North knows that for you to get Northern votes, the incentive to do that is to be a spokesperson of the North, to represent Northern interests, and if need be, to go into coalition with other people from other parts of the country. But in Igbo land, we can't see that push from the masses, which is saying, no matter how much money you bring, we are going to elect those people we feel. Some will disappoint us, some will work, but we need to have that incentive for our politicians to behave in the proper way. So I think that in summary of that video was to put the question that a leadership cannot be different from a followership. And Igbo land today is not breeding that followership that will create heroic leadership. Because when the elections are down, it boils down to who has money for the voters at the polling unit. How much money are you willing to give to the stakeholders? How much money are you giving to the traditional rulers? Or in the states where there are governors, who has the governor anointed? Whoever the governor anoints becomes governor. Chimaroke anointed Chime, and he became governor. Chime anointed the Buruburu, and he became governor. Same thing in a few states, minus Imo and Ebonyi, where the governor nominated somebody and some elites came together and fought him. But there haven't been real mass-led governance in Igbo land. So what I would love to see is a mass-led governance where the masses come out and say, this is the type of leadership we want. That leader will be besotted to the masses. He will now want to reflect their interest because he knows that he doesn't require money to get to where he is. All he requires is to continue to be on the good books of the preponderance of the people. So our young people, what I wanted them to learn is that the onus is the ball is in their court. So long as we keep doing this, so long as we are going to keep electing leaders who will go into the offices, first of all, to recover the money they spent. So they're not going to be fighting anybody about any so-called Igbo interest. They will recover the money they've spent, and then they will acquire more money for the next election. So in all of this, the masses do not have anything to show for it.
Could you speak to the rebuilding of Ani Igbo after the Biafran War? And then sort of what role did Onitsha, Aba, and Nnewi play in the rebuilding of Igbo?
So after the war, Igbo were in a quandary. 20 pounds was given to everybody who had money in a bank. Intense poverty, hunger, kwashiorkor had gone round. So it was a push for survival. And I must say that two important ingredients of Ndigbo drove that growth. One was the spirit of Onyaga and Nwanye. So our trading class, our business class, all went back to the villages and picked up young boys and took them to the cities, and took them to Onitsha and Aba and Co. to learn trade under them. Families took on their poorer relatives as nannies and helps and sent them to day schools those days when we used to have morning and day school. People send their nannies to day schools. And that led to the increase in manpower that we witnessed after the war. Together with that, but the idea of governance, the quality of governance, and I say we haven't paid much credit to Biasica. The quality of governance with the likes of QSP Okongu, with the likes of Florent Wapa, with the likes of the Elechi, former governor of Ebonyi, who were all commissioners. It was a star-studded team of commissioners. He didn't discriminate against those who were on the Biafran side and those who were not. He just formed a team of high intellectuals. And the Igbo land blossomed after that. So we had the first thing was the blossoming of the arts. The arts blossomed. We have teams like Peacocks, Original Wings, all those Ofege coming on stream immediately after the war, playing on our on the revival that was going on in Igbo land. So Peacocks came up with their popular tune Edi Kwanzaa, which was a team calling their colleague in Ghana, who had gone to Ghana and changed his name to Edi Kwanzaa, to say, come back, Aba is doing well. People have done well in Aba. We have the good people that are living in Aba. Business is thriving. Mike Merchandise, electronics dealer, glass dealer, Anye here, Toyota Crown. All the businessmen that were in Aba at that time were very big businessmen. In fact, it was from Aba that the People's Club started. Somebody pointed it out to me, that why the headquarters is in Onitsha, but the idea of People's Club came from Aba. So, but they decided to take the headquarters to Onitsha because predominantly they were mainly Anambra people who started it. Umezuoke, who was the national president at that time of People's Club. The whole idea of People's Club was to, solidarity, help one another. Of course, if you come to Enugu, you had the Enugu contractors, the Aru Nkwachas, the Nwandos, the Nkwantas, struggling, rebuilding, awarding contracts in the East. So if you look at the Igbo land of the 1970s, there was a massive growth of Igbo entrepreneurship, Igbo businessmen. And they grew because the government in the Southeast used our indigenous contractors in most of the work that they did at that time. So you find Eastern General Contractors, which was a combination of the Nwandos and Nkwantas and a few people coming together to form Eastern General Contractors. They did most of the work in Nsukka. They did most of the work in the East. Now, if you compare it to today, there are no Igbo business contractors today who have been made by working only in the Southeast. There is no big contracting firm, no big construction firm today and between the 5 states in the Southeast, I'm sure that on the average, we spend about between 100 to 300 billion annually on physical infrastructure projects. And if you check the contractors, none of them have grown to become any big contractor in the Southeast. So government is a major issue when you want to develop a place. And we must give credit to the government of Ukpa Biasika, the way they started. There were other tailwinds that we had after the Civil War. So the rise of the economy, the oil wells that grew, made it possible for us to grow. What I call the ideological commitment of the Gowon administration to national integration in terms of founding such institutions like federal government colleges, starting things like National Youth Service Corps, and trying to promote a sense of national being, bringing everybody together again. So Igbos went off to Federal Government College, Sokoto. Northern indigenes came to Federal Government College, Enugu, and made friendships that lasted till today, which sadly, by the military rule and by the government now in power, we have lost all of that. Nobody's willing to send his child anywhere out of his own geopolitical zone. So we have kind of regressed from what happened after the war, when you would think that the bitterness and the hatred that arose from the war would be a barrier. But by 9 years after the war, an Igbo man became the vice president. But during the military years, the military reversed back again to a conscious marginalization of the Igbos. The Northern military wing who fought that war still carried a grudge, still looked at us as rebels. And you could see it in the way and manner they treated the Southeast, which continued until the democracy came and we saw some Igbo presence in government. But the entrepreneurship that developed Igbo land, the work of the entrepreneurs in Aba, in Onitsha, was phenomenal. Onitsha grew into still becoming the largest market in West Africa. Grew is even on his own genre of literature called the Onitsha market literature. And if you go to Aba, the industrialization, the industries, from Starline Industries, from all the major manufacturers we had, if you go back now, even Nigerian breweries, even UAC, all had major warehouses in Aba. Aba was a growing city that will have become a hub of Igbo ingenuity, Igbo industry. So Aba made shoes, Aba made shirts, Aba made jeans. All of those came into the fray. Sadly for us, the 21 years of democracy hasn't led us to a revival, a rejuvenation of Aba and Onitsha. Rather, the two cities have decayed beyond what they were immediately post-Civil War. So the Igbo economy, the Igbo growth, the Igbo capacity for self-actualization, the Igbo concept of Onyaga na Nwanne, the Igbo concept of Uchu, the concept of hard work, the Igbo concept of Uche was exemplified strongly immediately after the war. That from 20 pounds by the 1980s, nowhere in Igbo land looked at a war went through that Igbo land. It was phenomenal. So when I saw the young people today equating those cities to social outing, to a place where you build hotels, I mean, Owerri has the largest hotels in Nigeria. Enugu is becoming a city where people go for the weekends to for partying and fun. I thought that something was fundamentally wrong in understanding our cities in terms of its social dynamics. I thought there was something important about understanding the spirit of Onitsha, the spirit that made people go to their villages, picked young boys, allowed them to learn trade under them, and they started their own businesses and grew. The idea that after the Civil War, we took our relatives from the villages, sent them to school, and many of them ended up even abroad today. The vast diaspora we have abroad today came from Igbo sending their kids to schools in America, in the UK, and that has led to more people. In fact, in those days, people got to the US and they helped people from their village to also migrate. So if you notice, people from a particular area, if the first person came to Atlanta, everybody in that area, came to Atlanta. If the person came to Maryland, people from that area ended up in Maryland. That was how far the Igbo of Onyaga na Nwanne, of pulling ourselves, was such a strong metaphor. So going forward, looking at the 21 years of democracy, and looking at those who are saying, yes, we can recreate that Igbo spirit if we become an independent Biafra. That's a valid point. That's a point we can push. Some said, no, if we restructure Nigeria, until we restructure Nigeria, we can't have that Igbo land. I said, very good point, and I understand it. Nigeria has issues that need to be resolved. But I have a problem. A child born in 1999, since when we've been waiting for this restructuring, is now already a graduate. So we've already done damage to a generation if we don't give them quality education, if we don't give them if we don't prepare them for the new global future. So I think that while all these issues are fantastic and ready to be done, there is the fierce urgency of now. How do we train the next generation? How do we make our children speak Igbo? Igbo na Nigeria nke tata. Si agwazina maka ife ga-eme echi, ka maka today. DMGS, why wouldn't we have the best secondary schools in Nigeria, boarding schools? Why is every Igbo man struggling to send his child to Loyola Jesuit in Abuja? Why is Loyola Jesuit now driving #1 in WAEC and JAM? Why are they now driving the #1 in SAT results and sending their kids to scholarships abroad? Why is there no equivalent of Loyola Jesuit one in Enugu, one in Awka, one in Onitsha, one in Anambra, one in Owerri, one in Umuahia? So we can decide as a deliberate policy of governance to turn around our education strategy and say, we're going to build, we started the science schools in Anambra and in most of the Southeast. Why can't we go back and say, you know what, these are schools of exceptionally quality people. So you can only enter here by merit. There is no room for quota system. That thing we say we don't like in Nigeria, we will start it first in Igbo land. So we say that Nigeria has made it impossible for people of Igbo land. Let's look around ourselves. Are there localities in Igbo land that are not benefiting from our growth? Can we have a deliberate policy of making sure that the children in Aya and Melum local government are getting the quality of education that the children in Onitsha local government are getting? Or that children in Eza are getting the same quality of education as children in Abakaliki? Or children in Arochukwu or wherever in Abia are getting the same quality of education as children in Umuahia? So we need to look into all this issue of inclusiveness, the issues of equity. We need to also say to Nigeria, you need to learn from us. Every year, we have years for admissions for our public service. We do proper exams, the best and the brightest in Igbo land, distributed amongst our geopolitical zones, even per local government. Let the best in each local government come out and join our civil service academy and be able to start thinking about how to deliver governance, infrastructure. Because government is not all about roads and markets. And while our people are praising the roads, which are very essential, but key ingredients of government include those invisible infrastructure of healthcare. COVID exposed all of us. With the impact of COVID, we realized how naked we are. Nobody could go abroad. So everybody was stuck in Nigeria. And for the first time, it dawned on us that there are no institutions. When I became the Corps Marshal in Federal Road Safety, the first thing I did was to rebuild the FRSC clinic. Since I left Federal Road Safety till date, I still go to the FRSC clinic. I built a proper hospital for them in Abuja. I put a dental chair there. I send the doctors there on training. I still visit the FRSA training. I have never gone for treatment abroad. I have never gone to seek medical health care abroad. The FRSC clinic provides me with quality health care. And I'm in fairly good health. Every year I do my annual checks. The FRSC doctor takes me through the annual checks. Because you see, what I learned as a Corps Marshal was that when you have an accident in Nigeria, there's only a 1 hour golden time during which you need medical care to survive. So if you don't get it, you can't be flown abroad while it is on. All the big men I knew who had road crashes died, who couldn't get medical care because they're still waiting to go to Dubai or go to London or go to Germany. Many of them died before such help could come. So I realized the importance of that doctor who knows you, who is close to you in Nigeria, close to you, who knows your medical history, so that you can get instant care in case you get involved in a road crash or you have a major health issue. So it is that lesson I hope that COVID will teach all our governors, all our local government chairmen to think about the hospitals close to them that can be their first port of call before they go forward. So to rebuild Igbo using what happened in the past is that we need to take the resources we are getting today and invest in that future that if tomorrow Nigeria is restructured, we will be the best part of Nigeria. If tomorrow we become an independent state, we will also be the best independent state in Africa. Because we need to stop thinking of ourselves as, measuring ourselves with areas that, if you take a Nigerian average, we think we're doing well. We need to look at what Rwanda is doing. They have attracted Carnegie Mellon University to open a campus in Rwanda. Why Microsoft has an office in Rwanda. If Igbo land is today the hub of technology students, of properly trained technology students, I can assure you, Google and Apple will set up an office in Enugu. They will go where the people are. Nobody in the world does not want quality manpower. So to learn from the lessons of our past, we need good governance. We need income. We need to grow our capacity. I think that the idea that we have to wait for federal allocation to pay salaries is something that we must reverse within a time frame, that all Igbo states are able to take care of the overhead costs from their internally generated revenue. And part of the ways to do it is that the moment we continue to build infrastructure that makes the middle class to survive, we have to deliver water to people's home, pipe-borne water. Boreholes are not the way to deliver water to people's home. We cannot live in a life of boreholes. So we need to deliver water. We need to start beginning to build sewage systems to be able to manage sewers. We need to begin to build waste management systems. These are things that are not visible to the eyes, but require manpower to think through it, require low corruption. We need to reduce corruption in the Southeast to the minimum, knowing that already we are not competing well in the national platform. So we need to build our capacity here. We need to make it possible that contractors working for who are based in Eastern Nigeria, just simply servicing the states of Enugu, Anambra, Imo, and Abia, become major contracting firms in Nigeria, that people see them as businesses that have grown in the East, so that the manpower they need, the quality of work they do, the ability to compete, the openness in tendering process will make it see more people of middle-class people heading back to the East to look for business. Because between the 5 Southeastern governments, as I keep repeating, if you look at their budget, Works usually has about 25 to 30% of that. If you average it to the budget, about 600 billion budget that is done in the Southeast, that means that there is about 120 to 150 billion naira worth of roadworks, school works that are going on in the Southeast, which proper contracting firms can be induced to become major employers of labor in the Southeast and help us rebuild in the long term at a lower cost. So I feel that the rebuilding our Igbo using this post-Civil War experience will entail us adopting the Onyaga and 1 year philosophy for us to approach using our uchu, hard work, and making sure that our governance infrastructure is modern, that our people invest in those who can deliver good governance and not those who have the money to distribute at the polling unit. So long as we keep electing those who distribute money at the polling unit, so long as we cannot expect them not to recover their money and prepare the money for the next election at our costs anyway.
So was this akin to the post-war rebuildings in Japan or Germany? That's rebuilding an Igbo. How does it compare to rebuilding of the, post-war rebuildings?
Well, let me say for Germany, Nigeria failed woefully in adopting a German model in handling the issue of Igbo land. And there was initial talk about reconstruction, rehabilitation, that the 3 arms of the Gowon administration, but they didn't follow it through. The current agitation for Biafra that you see is equivalent to what happened post-First World War in Germany. And the Western world humiliated Germany, deprived them of assets, and the same Germans, by the Second World War, with the economy in tatters, they were ready to follow a demagogue called Adolf Hitler. So, but if you look at today, if the government has gone ahead to invest in Igbo land, to behave in such a way that Igbo land becomes a powerhouse of innovation and growth, we will have seen a situation that will have built up a sizable trust in the Nigerian government. So if you look at what the Germans did what the Western world did after the Second World War, they now had the Marshall Plan to rebuild infrastructure in Germany, to not allow the Germans to be humiliated, to not allow the Germans to feel a sense of deprivation that will allow those pro-German Nazi views to flower. And this is critical in every society post-war, because it's surprising, 50 years after Biafra keeps reoccurring in Nigeria, and people haven't figured out why. The reason is that the mainstream of Igbo land, the people who are pro-Nigeria, have nothing to show for their pro-Nigerian behavior. They're not bringing back anything to show for their pro-Nigerian stance. So we need to show the Nigerian government. That is why I said that if people were to behave with common sense, this is the term. 2023 was the year that Nigerians will have said the 2 political parties will nominate Igbo candidates for the presidential election and elect an Igbo man president. That will go a long way to cement the views of those who are pro-Nigeria, that Nigeria has a room for everybody, including the Igbos. So, but if you continue this Scotch-et approach that says, oh, Igbos have no votes, they didn't support us in this time, we will not support them here. What will happen is that, as I keep telling people, that when you say that that Igbos are not supporting the federal government today, oh, they are in opposition, therefore there's no Igbo man to be elected, then it means that we forget our immediate past history, where the Yorubas fought strongly against what they felt was a northern attempt to deprive a Yoruba son from becoming president, fought for democracy in Nigeria, and led us to allowing two parties to nominate two Yoruba candidates in 1999. And since then, you could notice that the agitation from Yoruba land has changed. The Yorubas are no more as they were before the 1999 rule. If you look at the Niger Delta crisis and look at the amnesty program done by President Yar'Adua, you can see that the tone and the tone of the crisis in Niger Delta has changed significantly. The Niger Delta is no more holding Nigeria to ransom, just reaching out to the people, understanding their pain point, and creating an atmosphere leading up to even an Ijaw man becoming a vice president and subsequently becoming president. That changed the approach of the Niger Delta to the Nigerian project. So if I were to be advising the Nigerian state, what will change the approach of the Igbos to Nigeria today will be for Nigeria to bend backwards, just like the rest of the country has bent backwards. When the North said they were not ready for independence in 1957, we all said, okay, we'll wait for them to train more people. That delayed our independence for about 3 years. If you look back at when the North said, oh, if there is no, when we had the National Universities Commission and when we had the federal government colleges, we came up with the educational disadvantaged state and created a quota for them to allow them to be able to meet up. Educational disadvantaged state is not a permanent feature, but northern states have remained educational disadvantaged for the past 40 years, despite the huge amount of money that have gone in there from the national federal allocations. We should have allowed them by now to set a sunset clause to exit the educational disadvantaged state. But we accepted it for the purpose of nation building. We even came up with the concept of quota system, federal character, to reflect all the zones of Nigeria, all the states of Nigeria in appointment in such a way to give everybody a sense of belonging. That again was because we were bending backwards. So now I'm of the view that the rest of the country need to look at the electorally disadvantaged people of Southeast. By our numbers, we may not win a presidential election. Going by the requirements, we need to have the largest number of votes, and we need to have 25% of the votes cast in at least 2/3 of the states in Nigeria, which is 24. So even if you win all of Igbo states, you can't be president. We need to create coalition. Now, people will say to me, yes, we cannot allow the Igbos to go because what is happening is that the Igbos are asking to break Nigeria, and then they still want to rule Nigeria. And my answer is very simple. Nigeria has been at war since 2009 because a sect, an Islamic sect called Boko Haram, have said they want to establish a caliphate in Nigeria and turn Nigerians to an Islamic caliphate. They've put us at war. And that caliphate that Boko Haram is based around the Borno axis. Many of them are Kanuris who are fighting this war. It didn't stop Nigeria from appointing the chief of army staff from Borno, appointing a chief of staff to the president from Borno, and appointing the national security advisor from Borno. We've never accused the Borno people of levying war on Nigeria because Boko Haram is doing that. So because some segment of Igbo people say they want Biafra, cannot be used to say that means that, oh, the whole of Igbos don't want Nigeria. No, Nigeria has to actually, we as a country, we need to bend backwards to be in the nation building mode, which was what happened to Germany after the Second World War, that led to Germany becoming the strongest economy in Europe today. So to rebuild, the rebuilding of Igbo land started off well. The federal government had policies, but they didn't follow it through. And that created the resentment that is fueling the agitations you see in the Southeast today. Those same agitations surfaced in the Southwest at some point. The same agitation surfaced in the Niger Delta at some point. The same agitation suffered in the North, reared its head in the North, when they were all fighting against the PDP government of Jonathan and saying we need a northern president to rule Nigeria. So the agitations have happened in various parts of Nigeria, but that creates the opportunity for people to come together and begin to think about how do we put our past behind us as a lesson? How do we have those conversations that will lead us to learn the lessons of the past and push on to the future with confidence of creating a large market, a devolved Nigeria, where the constituent parts have powers to take care of their local issues and at the same time have the large markets of Nigeria and possibly West Africa to trade in.
Some have characterized M.I. Okpara as an Igbo Lee Kuan Yew. How would you react to that?
That's a fair characterization because M.I. Okpara was quite visionary. He was quite bold in his part of industrialization. You know, what many people still don't remember was that the Eastern region was the region with the least resources during the First Republic. The Eastern region was the region with the least resources. And despite that, the Eastern region, you know, overtook many of the regions of Nigeria in terms of manpower development, industrialization, and even infrastructure. So M.I. Okpara was quite a significant leader. When he came up with the idea of University of Nigeria in 1960, I mean, the Southeast School barely was struggling to pay school teachers' salaries and co. But he came up with the idea of, you know, he supported the idea of University of Nigeria, took it to the Eastern Regional House of Assembly at that time, and got it passed. And it was called the Pamoyi University, the Palm Kernel University, because most of our income came from the palm kernel. And today, University of Nigeria is an icon. It was the vision of Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, but Okpara was the person who was premier at that time, who pushed that university to come to fruition. So I think that that characterization of Okpara is a fair characterization. If we had continued on the path he started, of course, Igbo land will have been the most industrialized part of Africa today. But all is not lost. We can still recreate that if we understand that we need a public service that can implement the vision of leaders. We keep thinking that it's about the leaders alone. No, the leaders have to build the team with the capacity. I mean, I can imagine that I don't think that there is any part of the Igbo civil service today, any part of the Igbo land civil service, where they have an online document sharing system to be able to work remotely during this COVID period. Let's even take the COVID period. And this is unfortunate. For a well-educated part of Nigeria, we should be the part that have transformed into an IT-driven public service. I'm not sure if you go to any Igbo state and tell them to give you the strategic plan, sectoral strategic plan on education, on healthcare, on this, that you will get those plans, if not for the ones maybe the World Bank had done in the past. So it is critical that we don't mistake Okpara as an individual. Okpara was sustained by a strong public service culture, who didn't just sit down every month and thought what will come to them into their pockets, but who thought about how to deliver social goods to the people. Okay.
The Oga Nwaboy system of trade, learning trade in Onitsha and Nnewi, it was very powerful about, amongst Omonna, but seems to have disappeared. I don't know whether it's a trust factor but people now tend to get the Nwaboy from outside of their kith and kin. Mm. So do you think the old system can ever be revived again?
No, we shouldn't pray for the system to be revived.
Okay.
It was a growth pattern at a point in our time. Most of the traders in Onitsha have trained their children to university level. So their children are not available to be Nwaboy. Most of the Anambra people who traded in Onitsha, all their children have gone to university. Some have moved abroad. So they can't come back and be Nwaboy. So some of the Nwaboy are coming from other states in Igbo land, and they too are also growing in the food chain. If you come, there was an example that if you go to Singapore, you cannot find a Singaporean who is doing menial job. They have to be Malaysians coming from Malaysia and Filipinos. You can't find a nanny that is Singaporean. It's not possible. They've moved up the food chain. So the Nigerians are moving up. Even in America, Nigerians used to be the taxi drivers and the security men. Now they are the nurses and the doctors. The Ethiopians are now the drivers, the garage managers. Those are jobs that were predominantly Nigerian jobs in those days. So the Nwaboy system has to be repackaged. Because really, what are you learning in the 6 years you are with your Oga. Yeah, in those days, there was information asymmetry. You had to learn from your Oga how to order things from Japan, how to order from Taiwan. You had to learn under him which goods go at this time of the year and the other. But I can assure you that with the internet, everybody can go to Alibaba.com and order anything they want. So that training process is no more as relevant as it used to be. What is relevant today is that we need to find a way of having people who have gone through the 6 years primary school, 3 years junior secondary school, if possible, and veer off into trade, and then find out how we can establish them with traders, a state program that will put them with traders. So they continue going to their trade in the morning and continue taking classes maybe in the evening for their SSS. So by the time they are doing 3 years of their SSS, they've done also 3 years, maybe 6 hours every day of working with their Oga. So the state is now inducing it so that in that way, when you finish, your SSS certificate, your Oga's testimonial will form the basis of a loan system that the state can offer to those apprentices to start their own trade. So the Oga may be able to chip in something for the help you've given him. For the time you've worked for him, he will put down something. The state will put down something for having you taking him as an intern. So an internship scheme has to come out of it. Those years of going back to the village and picking a boy, rarely do we find people now. There are still some, but the vast majority have access to free education that the primary schools offer, free education up to secondary school in most of the Southeast states, or even their relatives are paying for them, and people have taken them on to go to school. So having that 6 years of illiterate young boys is no more available. And I don't think we should pray for it to come back. What we should pray for is to move that system into a trust system, as you said, so that while you are still in secondary school, you're already interning. So maybe school finishes at 2 in the afternoon, 1 in the afternoon, you go over to your master's shop and stay with him till 6 when the markets close, after lunch or something, or you spend your holidays, 3 months of your holidays, you will be with a master. So he will write a testimonial at the end of the 3 years saying, you are diligent, you are punctual, you are this, and then he will want to put in something for getting that free labor, while the state government will now say, those who have passed through this our apprenticeship scheme, who have learned from the people who are in the market. If you've learned how to trade on freezers and fridges, we are going to be able to give you some amount of money to start off your trade. So I think when I was running for governor, I came up with the idea of the new apprenticeship scheme. That information asymmetry, that thing you need to learn for 6 years, is no more relevant today because everybody has access. Most of the children born today are what I call digital natives. So they have access to the trading. They can board a plane in Enugu and go with Ethiopian Airlines to China. Those days, one person will go and come back and then share what he has bought within all the traders, one major importer. Today, everybody can be an importer. Logistics have made it possible to deliver goods from anywhere. I see Nigerians ordering things on Amazon today. So even the whole concept of market in Onitsha has to change. Onitsha has to be more like onitshamarket.com, more than it is Onitsha Market physical market, because people across Nigeria will have to order things from Onitsha. The logistics end will be how to deliver it to them, at the end of the day. So there are many forces that we have to contend with the Nwabuoyi system. It has to, people have moved up the food chain. There's a trust deficiency issue, but there has to be a state-organized apprenticeship system. So those who register into it is almost like you have taken a path to a diploma. So you get your SSS, and then you get a certificate for your internship with a trader, and you are ready to start off a trade. Or you can still do 1 year, what I call national vocational certificate, or the 2 years you need to do to get a diploma. So these are all pathways to education today, so that we don't constrain education to just going to the classroom, but also getting the certificates and learning from the practical side, which is what happens in the US and the UK. A lot of children start interning once they enter year 1, they start doing internships. And from high school, all those internships count for them when it's time for employment.
There seems to be a disconnect between the traders and then Azwafia and the elites. So I don't know what you think about it. what Ndibo have lost because of this disconnect?
Well, I don't know how to place that disconnect, but there's always a different approaches to life and everything between those who are very educated and those who are not so educated. I think it happens to every culture. I think it happens in every society. The elites of the UK are still those who want to be prime minister, go to Eton College, go to Cambridge. There's a pathway to the civil service in the UK. There's a pathway to many things. If you want to be a top student in America, the Ivy League universities. If you look at the presidents, where they are coming from, you look at their backgrounds. So there's always that social, what is the greatest attribute of Igbo life is the flexibility we have, that people can come from nowhere and get to the top. And I think entrenching that, what I call equal opportunity, is something I think Igbo should entrench. Equal opportunities. We're not looking for equal outcomes. Everybody gets to start at the same starting line. So school, which is the major part that gives, people who are smart are going to get through free primary school, quality secondary schools, and can go on to colleges and go on to technical work, go on to learning trade and working as different things. Certification of tilers, of plumbers, of electricians, and all that. We need to create that pathway so that people can overcome their disability. What I like about Igbo land is that there is no parentage or peerage system that ossifies privilege. Privilege in Igbo land is available to anybody who is ready to work hard and make it to the top. So if you come to every community in Igbo land, the people that are driving it are not those whose fathers were X, Y, Z. It is those who are thriving in whatever they are doing today, who have put in hard work, effort, and all that. What that does sometimes is that it can also create an amoral situation where people struggle to survive, do anything at all costs to get money and get ahead. So the purpose of governance is to keep making sure that those who depart from the path of right and goes through the path of wrong are punished, that we do not reward people who follow the shortcut, that our society keeps valuing the concept of hard work, and of morality, of Ebuchukwu. We're a society that, and it's supposed to be not just a government issue, but a general society approach, that even the churches, I'm looking forward to the days when the churches will announce, we will not accept donations from governors if those donations are not captured in the budget or you don't show us the source of the money. I want to see a situation where we say, if you're a public servant and we know your salary is 1 million a month and you give us 5 million, you need to tell us where the money came from. So all of this will induce behavior. Of course, we can't all be pretending that the governor comes to church and announces 10 million naira donation. Say, so at the end of the day, when we now start saying a governor spent 30 billion on security votes in 4 years, it is all of us that took the 30 billion now. It is the churches that got 10 million donation, the bishops that got 5 million for coming. The police people that visited him, he gave money. The village, the stakeholders that came, everybody that visited, I said, the governor of Akagom, they will take go. But then they get out to see no corruption. It can be. It is all of us that participated in the looting of the state. So that looting has to stop when the society says, no, we cannot be sharing what belongs to the collective. The money that can build a primary school, a new health center, and you go there, you have the churches, every diocese of a church doing synod, the governor goes and gives 5 million or 10 million. Every time the bishops, for those who have children at wedding, you send 2 million. Every time this person is doing something, you send 5 million. All those monies are coming from somewhere. So we can't eat our cake and have it. It is important that we have a conversation about how much we are going to allow public officers to use their access to public till to serve as generous people to us.
This concept of change coming from the outside, like Igbo diaspora, because there's this growing sense of there being an Igbo nation outside of Nigeria. Do you think there's any way of getting them to think more home and to come together and then help make change back home?
Igbos are thinking home. I don't agree with anybody who says the Igbos need to think home. Igbos are thinking
home. To make it in a collective way.
So, no, let me explain what I mean by Igbos are thinking home. Igbo land is always a permanent construction site of residential homes. People abroad are always sending in money, building houses in their villages, giving their cousins money to start business and all that. Now, what we need to know is that money is fungible. People are going to where they will get the best returns for their investment. So we need to create that atmosphere that creates investment. If you ask a Yoruba diaspora person what he wants to do, he will want to build a house in Lekki. Because already that's about, if he goes to Lekki Phase 3, he buys land of 40 million, for instance, and then spends under 30 million and builds 70 million. He can automatically get rent of about 3.5, 4 million every year, which is a 5% return. That property could be worth 120 million in another 5 years or 10 years. So he has got capital gains, and he has gotten the growth in rent. He has gotten rental income. Now you build the same house in Enugu. It is difficult for you to even get rent of 1 million a year. If you build it in Onitsha, a flat is 25,000 a month in Onitsha. They pay by the month. 30,000 a month. So you won't even recover the money in terms of rental income. So you won't even get up to 2% return. So what we need to do is that if we put infrastructure in our place, remodel our streets, invest money, borrow money, and I keep saying it, if we say today we are going to raise a bond for an Anambra development bond to be managed by a reputable infrastructure company, and we are going to provide infrastructure in the whole of Onitsha, Awada, all the adjoining cities of Onitsha, all the streets will be tarred, all the sewage system will be built, we will open parks and things like that. You will see that the quality of manpower that will relocate there will increase, and the investment from the diaspora will increase because they'll be seeking for the returns, right? So money will seek for returns. We cannot expect people who are going to retire after 40 years, 25, 30 years of working, who are in their 50s, who are now waiting for retirement. All of us now looking towards retirement. And you take that money and say you want to invest in Igbo land because you want to be a good Igbo man. No, it's not going to happen because nobody is going to pay you for your hospital bills when you're 80. Nobody is going to pay you for you to go. So, but in Yoruba land, you see people who have, two twin duplex in Magodo, in Magodo in Lagos, even in Akowonjo, in Satellite Town. And they can live off the rent. Not to talk of those who have in Lekki and Ikoyi. Many of them live off the rent at retirement. They scale down their lives and they can pay their bills from those income. So we need to have those islands, those investments that will make us, in terms of physical assets. Second one is that the Igbos have to increase the integrity of our businesses. Our businesses have to grow to become corporations, so that people can invest in a corporation. Like I said, if you're a contracting firm today and you say, I need to raise, let's say, 5 billion Naira capital, 10 billion Naira capital for us to do projects in the Southeast, we will be going to contractors here. A lot of people in diaspora will invest. If you are honest, if you keep proper accounts, if at the end of the day, people are investing in Julius Berger, because Julius Berger is not going to cheat them. The high cost of their doing business notwithstanding, he's not going to cheat the shareholders. So once you're not going to take the money from us and cheat us, people are going to invest in your business. And that's where I think the next phase of Igbo growth will happen. The children of all our entrepreneurs are going to turn into corporations where people can invest. Because you don't expect all of us to come and do business physically. So we can do the business by investing. Our governments can raise bonds to develop, like this water scheme now. We can say we're going to raise a 100 billion Naira bond. We are going to meter all the waters that we're going to be spending. We're going to pay back through our inflows from maybe FAC account and through the money we're getting from the metering system. So that way, the people in diaspora can invest in those kind of bonds secured. They know that every quarter they will get their interest. They will get their principal at the end of the period of the bond. So we can't expect investment at individual levels without creating the vehicle for the investment.
Any final thoughts?
Well, ndị be anyị ife anyị nọ na ya na Naịjirịa kịta dị onye nsogbu, and anyị kwesịrị iji uche, anyị kwesịrị iji uchu, anyị kwesịrị ime ka ndị ma ife na Naịjirịa, anyị kwesịrị iji ezigbote uche wee so ife anyị nọ n'ime ya. ala ka imetụ ndị Igbo si okwusi okwu ike na Naịjirịa na ife anyị na-achọrọ na ya achọrọ ya. Ndị Naịjirịa amalụgo na anyị si na ya achọrọ ife bifo ọkwa sị gị na-enyere onye Igbo ego chenji. Ndị Igbo sikwa na-enyefe ego na family chenji the whole country kpọwakwa anyị n'ọnụ si na anyị na-eje ofu ebe na ya we put all our eggs in one basket, na ndị Igbo adịghị eme politics ọfụma. Maka mgbe mbụ bụ abịa sị gị ndị Igbo kwali enyefe ego na ebe ọ bụla inyefe ego feche, mana kịta afụgo na ebere ebe enye ndị Igbo ego kafa na-eche na ife afọ anyị kwere na ya anyị kwesịrị na ya ike. Onye afọ anyị si na anyị kwere na ya anyị ga-atụ vootu afọ na at the national level. Achọrọ m ka anyị sikwa etu a na-eme at the local level. Anyị malụ ndị afọ anyị ma ga-alụla anyị ọlụ, ndị afọ ga-abụ faje efe ekwute ọnụ anyị n'okwu, ndị afọ ga-abụ faje na fama ewere ife enyere ndị Igbo tii na akpafa. Ndị afọ ka anyị ga-esi ọnwụ n'ala Igbo si nọ ndị a ga-achị anyị, nọ ndị a ga-ejela anyị ozi faluo afa ụzọta nke bụ nke anyị. Maka na ife anyị na-ajị okwu ọbụla anyị na-ekwu elu asị ọkwali nọ politiks ka ala egwu, nọ politiks la ala egwu, nọ nke ba gị na-akpa nke onye ri ka o bu na. Ọ bụrụ nke onye ri ka o bu na na politiks, maka na ife ọbụla anyị mee tata ọ ga-emetụta anyị n'arọ na-abịa abịa, arọ ịtọ na-abịa, arọ ịnọ na-abịa. Asị ọkwali ka ọchị arọ ịnọ afọ ọ na-achị, nwa nọ na JS2 ga-agụsigo SS3 ma arọ ịnọ afọ. Asị ọkwalite 8 years ọchịkata ọchị ya 2 terms 8 years, nye bụ 8 years nwa nọ na JS3 ga-apụtago na university. So na ife ọbụla emere ọfụma na nwa afọ emebigo nwa afọ permanently, ọ damejigo life nwa ahụ. So ihe m na-ayọ ndị be anyị bụ na ebe anyị nọ na ya kịta anụwa bụ na ife niile onye ọbụla na-ekwu dịsị mma, alụ niile a na-atụ dịsị mma, mana kee maka tata, kee maka bọjetị apasị tata na Anambra steeti na Ebonyi na Imo, kee maka civil servants a na-ewe n'ọlụ tata ka a ga-enene exam, a ga-enye anyị ncha niile equal opportunity ka anyị wee nwee ike banye na ya bụ civil service. Kee maka ndị a na-enye anyị niile anyị nwere gọọmenti na-eke, a na-ewepụta ya sị na gọọmenti ewepụtago esteti anụnwa dị etu a na ego na ọ bụ onye nwere ego iche igo nye bịa egolu. Kedu nke anyị na-enyere individuals and estate everywhere? Olugo mgbe anyị ga-ewepụta ife anyị nwee sị onye ọbụla bịa nweta anyị na South East, gọọmenti enye gị C of O immediately ka iwee nwee ike were ya jebili ego na bank. Ị na-anya tata onwere bank nwere headquarters n'ala Igbo, mana onwe ife sola anyị nso inwe regional bank, ọ bụgodị na ya nwere national bank. Support our microfinance bank, ha bụrụ state microfinance bank, nwee ike nwee ume inyelu ndị be anyị na-azụ afịa aka, ndị chọrọ 50,000, ndị chọrọ 200,000, ndị chọrọ 1 million naira afọ efe ga-eje gbata nya bụ mbibi. So ekwere m nnọọ na echi dị mma, mana tata dị m mma. Ya ka m ji asị na ife m ji aga n'iru n'ụwa m bụ na taa bụ gboo. Okwu na-edu m ụbọchị niile bụ na taa bụ gboo, maka na afọ mba osi tata dị mma, osi tata dịba mma na ọdịba gboo, mana tata bụ gboo. Echi itele aka ka anyị welu na uche, welu uchu, wele egwu Chukwu tinye na tata ka anyị wee maa na echi anyị ga-adị mma. Maka na nke onye ka tata ka ọ na-aghọla echi, mkpụrụ ịkụ tata ka ị ga-aghọla echi. Ka anyị welu nụ tata ka ife anyị ga na-ekwu n'okwu bụrụ ka ana Igbo bụrụ ebe afọ a ga-eji na-ama atụ na Naịjirịa. Onye si na ife anyị na-eme adịrọ mma, ọ bịa n'ala Igbo anyị si na anyị maka anyị si eme ya n'ala Igbo. So ife nna ya ndị be anyị niile.